Sometimes it's not a major catastrophe that changes your life. Sometimes it just takes one offer. I'm Emma. I'm 30 years old. I was an ordinary married woman. My life was hard, but I was a decent person. I thought so. Until one night, a man offered me $50,000. Just one night, a one-night mistake. Doesn't make me an immoral woman, does it? But at that moment, there was something I didn't know. After I got that money, nothing would ever be the same. I was a different person. So, how did I get here? What led me down this path? And this is where my story begins. I'm Emma. I'm 30 years old. My long, wavy chestnut hair falls to my shoulders and my skin is always smooth. My light green eyes had a deep but cool gaze. Every outfit I wore revealed the perfect lines of my body. People turned their heads when they saw me. Women envied me. Men couldn't take their eyes off me. But the truth is, beauty alone means nothing. I thought beauty would bring me luck, but it didn't protect me. It didn't feed me. It didn't make me happy. On the outside, everyone envied me, but no one knew who I really was. No one knew the questions I asked myself in the mirror when I came home in the evenings. My marriage was presented to me like a fairy tale. My husband Daniel was the man who once promised me the world. When he met me, there was passion in his eyes, as if all he wanted was to make me happy. But over time, everything changed. In the first years, everything was fine. I was in love with him and he with me. But as time passed, he started to lose interest. First, he started forgetting small details. Then, he gave all his attention to his work. By the time he came home in the evening, we had nothing to talk about. His eyes, which once looked at me with admiration, were now locked on the TV or the phone screen. Did he still love me? Or had I, too, become the background music of his life? And then, financial difficulties began. Debts piled up, credit cards maxed out, Daniel lost his job, and after a while, he just stayed at home and did nothing. He spent his days in front of the TV with a beer bottle in his hand. I, on the other hand, worked every day to survive. I worked as a waiter in the bar of a luxury hotel, serving the women who came every day dressed in diamonds, the men who sipped expensive whiskey, the customers who smiled politely when they saw me, but ignored people like me. Sometimes one of them would compliment me. "What beautiful eyes you have. Why don't you go to a better place instead of working in this hotel?" But nothing ever changed. In the evening, I'd go home, and Daniel would be on the couch. The place is a mess. The bills are still unpaid. Every night I would fall asleep with the same thought. Don't I deserve better than this? That night, when I was lost in these thoughts, I saw him. That night, everything changed. That night, working under the dim lights of the hotel, I saw him for the first time. Victor DeLuca. The moment he stepped into the room, the energy changed. People began to whisper softly. The waiters unconsciously became more attentive. He ignored it all and walked slowly towards the bar. He was tall, his dark hair perfectly combed. The first 2 buttons of his shirt were undone. He wore a smart suit without a tie. Every detail, from his watch and shoes to the bracelet on his wrist, showed that he had planned everything down to the last detail. He was not an ordinary rich man, but that wasn't the only thing that made him different. His eyes. He was watching me with a calm but menacing expression. Most customers would have ordered their drinks and gone off to their own conversations, but Victor DeLuca was studying me. He was weighing things. After a while, a waiter's voice came from behind me. "Emma, the customer in the corner wants to buy his drink from you." It wasn't a strange request. I knew I attracted most male customers, but I still felt a strange stirring inside me. I turned my head slightly to look. Victor was leaning comfortably back in his chair, swirling the glass of whiskey he held in his hand in slow motion. When his eyes locked on mine, a slight but confident smile appeared on his face. I didn't know what he was trying to do, but it was part of the job, so I held my head high, took a deep breath, picked up my tray, and walked over to his desk. Little did I know at that moment that my life would never be the same again. When I approached his table, he didn't take his eyes off me for a moment. He was so relaxed, as if it was the most natural thing in his life to sit here and wait for me. As I put my tray on the table, he got to the point without hesitation. "I asked you to serve because I want to see everyone's faces, to know everything about this place. I need to have an opinion about everyone." His voice was deep and calm, choosing each word carefully. I looked up slightly as he poured his whiskey into the glass. "Is that so? Then is there anything else you want to know about the hotel, Mr. I noticed the slight flicker in his eyes. I was testing the limits, but he seemed to enjoy it. "DeLuca," he said. "But names are unimportant. There are ways to understand people better." I lifted the wine bottle and touched his whiskey. "And what did you learn about me?" He smiled. "Very little yet." I held out my hand, ready to take the tray and walk away, when his voice stopped me. "Emma." There was something strange about the way she said my name. I turned to her slowly. Do you know me? Her smile got a little deeper. No, I don't, but I will. I felt that this moment had lasted strangely too long. I wouldn't have had a conversation like this with a normal customer, but Victor DeLuca was not normal. Somehow he already seemed to have the upper hand over me. I bowed my head slightly and replied with a distant smile. Good evening to you, Mr. DeLuca. And I turned and walked away. But even as I left, I couldn't deny the weight of his gaze on my back. That night, I realized he was interested in me, but what I didn't know was that he had already found out everything about me. When I opened my eyes in the morning, the silence in the house hit me like a heavy stone. Daniel wasn't with me, but that was nothing new. I sat up in bed and looked at my watch. How many mornings had I woken up thinking about overdue bills? How many nights had I fallen asleep without finding a solution? I went into the kitchen and saw Daniel sitting in front of the TV. Not even breakfast in front of him, just a beer in his hand at this early hour of the morning. He thought he had put it down hard on the table so it wouldn't make any noise, but I had noticed. I took a deep breath and went into the kitchen. Daniel, the bills are still unpaid. The electricity is about to be cut off. The credit cards are maxed out. We can't even make the rent. Daniel didn't even take his eyes off the TV. Emma, I don't want to deal with this in the morning. I put my hands on the table, trying to suppress my anger. You don't want to deal with it? This is our life, Daniel. I work every day. I take care of you. I do everything on my own. What do you do? Nothing. At that moment, he turned his eyes to me. There was still a look of indifference in his eyes. I'm not doing anything? He put the beer bottle aside and gave a mocking laugh. I'm working, Emma, but things are bad right now. There's no need for you to panic so much. I'm panicking? I couldn't control my voice. Daniel, I work every day. How can I not panic when the debts are piling up? He crossed his arms and shook his head. If you're that uncomfortable, quit. We'll find a way. At that moment, something inside me snapped. I realized I was with a man who took no responsibility for his own life. We'll figure it out, right? I whispered. I squeezed my hands and took a deep breath. You know what, Daniel? I'm so tired of having this conversation with you. You don't really want to find a solution, you just want time to pass. But I don't want to wait anymore. I turned around and he murmured behind me as I walked out the kitchen door, thinking I hadn't heard him. Sometimes you overreact, Emma. When I heard that sentence, all the anger and frustration inside me was about to explode like a volcano. But I didn't turn to him and say anything, because there was no point in talking to him anymore. I grabbed my coat and closed the door hard and went out to go to the hotel. When I got to work, I was trying to clear my head. I went into the kitchen, got my coffee, looked in the mirror. I had black circles under my eyes from exhaustion. I felt like an idiot, and worst of all, I was stuck. I took a deep breath and stepped into the luxurious lobby of the hotel. I had to focus on my work, but at that moment, my eyes involuntarily searched for him. Victor DeLuca. He was sitting in his usual place in the corner, but this time it was different. This time he seemed to be waiting for me. His eyes were directly on me, just like last night. One of the waiters approached me. Emma, DeLuca wants you to serve again. Normally I wouldn't have minded, but this time there was a strange nervousness in me. I took a deep breath and looked up before looking at him. Victor was sitting there, as if patiently waiting for me to step in. I slowly picked up the tray and made my way to his desk. This time I had prepared myself. When I placed the glass in front of him, his voice was deep and clear. What kind of morning is it? I squinted my eyes slightly. I just started my workday, Mr. DeLuca. He smiled. Me too. Without taking his eyes off me, he gestured to the chair next to him. Sit down. I hesitated for a moment. This was my workplace. But he spoke so naturally, as if it would be disrespectful to refuse to sit down. When I sat down, his voice lowered even more. He studied me closely, was silent for a while. And then he spoke clearly. I'll give you $50,000, one night, in exchange. I want you to be real. Victor's words hung in the air. I give you $50,000, one night, in exchange. I want you to be real. My whole body tensed. My heart was beating like crazy. This had to be a joke. I blinked my eyes, opened my mouth, but no words came out. Finally, I pulled myself together and found my voice. Are you serious? Victor bowed his head slightly without hesitation. I'm serious. A million trillion things that went through my mind at that moment. How was such an offer possible? Why was he offering me something like this? We had only met last night. The questions in my mind poured out of my lips. Why me? Victor raised his glass, not taking his eyes off me. Don't get me wrong, Emma. It's not a matter of luck. I didn't choose you by chance. I watched you. I know who you are, how you live, how you struggle. My whole body flinched. Did you investigate me? Victor smiled slightly, but it was a smile without warmth. I don't trust anyone, Emma. I don't know what you think, but I'm not that kind of woman. There wasn't even a hint of surprise on Victor's face. Are you really? For a moment, I didn't know what to say. There was a great conflict inside me at that moment. I should have said no. I should have stood up decisively and turned around and walked away. But Victor intervened. But Look, there's no need to rush. Let me tell you how it's going to be. He put his whiskey on the table, leaned forward, and continued speaking in a low voice. This isn't just a physical deal, Emma. I want a real night. I'm not buying this night. I want to live it. He caught me with his eyes, but I was still trying not to react. Tonight we will have dinner together in a nice restaurant. His voice was determined. We will spend the whole night together. You'll get your money in advance, and if you don't want to, you can end the night after dinner. Victor's words hung in the air. We'll spend the whole night together. You'll get your money in advance, and if you don't want to, you can end the night after dinner. My heart was racing. Countless thoughts were running through my mind. Could I really agree to this? I stared at Victor, and he was relaxed, as if he already knew my answer. Why was he doing this? When a man makes such an offer to a woman, it's usually clear from the start what he wants. But Victor was leaving it up to me to decide. It wasn't something I could fully trust. But at the same time, he was so sure and calm, it was hard to resist. $50,000. Just one meal. And then if I got up and left, nothing would happen. I'd have your money, and I'd be out of this debt. So I started, sounding calmer than I thought I would. All I have to do is have dinner with you. And I get $50,000? Victor tilted his head slightly. Yes. He said it so clearly and confidently that I had a strange feeling. I did an internal calculation. What would I lose? Eating didn't make anyone immoral. It was up to me to get up and leave afterwards. If that was really an option, why not take it? I bit my lip, averting my eyes from him. Is it really that easy? Victor smiled slightly, but it was not a smile of triumph. Rather, it was an expression that said he knew exactly what I was thinking. I don't like things that are easy, Emma, but I like things to work within the rules. He was weighing his words. He was playing a game, but I knew the rules of this game. I narrowed my eyes and looked at him. Why me? I asked this question one more time because I really wanted to know the answer. After a short silence, Victor shrugged his shoulders slightly. When I first entered the hotel and saw you, Emma, you surprised me with your innocence and grace. I felt a stirring inside me. It was a very special feeling, a feeling I hadn't felt in a long time. Yes, I knew I was beautiful, but here was a man standing in front of me after all these years with words that made me feel like a woman. And this man was a very powerful, charismatic man, and he was offering me money I would never earn in my life, just to have dinner with me. I breathed slowly. Okay, Victor smiled with a slight tilt of his head. I'll call them to pick you up at 8 in the evening. I was still hesitating, but I couldn't change the words that came out of my mouth. He didn't take his eyes off me for a moment as he stood up. See you then, Emma. And without looking back, he walked out of the lobby with heavy steps. I froze in my seat. I stared after Victor. When evening came, I was still undecided. It was approaching 7:30 p.m. and I felt a strange uneasiness. I got up from the armchair and approached the mirror. I didn't have my makeup on yet. My hair was disheveled, but there was a slight stirring in me, and just as I was thinking about what to wear, there was a knock at the door. I froze for a moment. My heart started beating fast. I walked slowly to the door and opened it slowly. There was an employee of the hotel standing in front of me. He was holding a large, luxurious box. Was DeLuca sent your outfit for tonight? My eyes widened. Victor! Had he picked out clothes for me? As I took the box in my hand, the man bowed and walked away without saying anything. I closed the door and looked at the box. Not knowing what to think, I untied the ribbon. Out of the box came a silky, elegant, but incredibly bold outfit. It was ice blue in color, tight enough to fit my body, with a boldly deep cleavage and an incredibly elegant mini-cut that revealed my legs. It was accompanied by high-heeled shoes with thin straps that matched the dress and a small bag in the same color. I gasped for a moment. What was Victor trying to do? Was he giving me orders by sending me this outfit? Or was he just setting the rules for the evening? For a moment I felt the fabric of the dress with my hand. This dress was expensive. It's very expensive. I knew I shouldn't hesitate for a moment, but still, a note fell out of the box. I chose this for you. I hope you like it. Victor. These words left a strange warmth in me. Holding the dress in my hand, I looked at myself in the mirror. I was not going to forget this moment. I was making a choice, and wearing this outfit would mean that I was really getting into the game. Taking a deep breath, I took off my clothes and carefully slipped the dress on, when the silky fabric fit my body perfectly, something changed inside me. I threw my shoulders back. My cleavage was on full bold display. The mini cut of the dress made my legs look even longer than they were. The fabric hugged my every curve perfectly. Was this me? Immediately afterwards, I wore my hair wavy and applied a light but impressive makeup on my face. I defined my eyes and applied a bright but alluring red to my lips. I took one last look in the mirror and I didn't recognize me. The woman standing in front of me was not the old Emma. I sighed deeply as I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes misted over. Just then I heard the sound of an engine outside. It sounded like Victor's car coming from downstairs. The game had begun, and now I was in this game. When I stepped out, I saw that long black limousine again at the entrance of the hotel. The driver opened the back door. I felt a slight tremor inside, but I didn't show it. The strange thing, even for me, was that I didn't think of turning back anymore. I took a deep breath and got into the car. When the door closed, Victor's eyes were on me. He looked me up and down. For the first time, I saw a faint flicker in his eyes. The man who normally planned everything in advance, who was unaffected by anything now. He paused for a moment, and then he bowed slightly. "You look perfect, Emma." A strange warmth came over me, but I knew I shouldn't lose my temper. I smiled slightly at him. "I thought you already knew that." Victor smiled slightly, but the charismatic hardness on his face didn't disappear. I knew, but seeing is always different. He nodded slightly to the driver without taking his eyes off me, and the car started moving. The night was beginning, but I still didn't know where this night would take me. When the car stopped, the door opened and I stepped out. When I looked up, my eyes widened in admiration. This was not just a restaurant. It was a special place that towered just above the city lights, surrounded by glass walls, giving the feeling of touching the sky. The waiters who greeted us at the door recognized Victor immediately. They directed us to the most private section. Victor gently extended his arm to me. I hesitated for a moment, but then I accepted, with a slight smile. When we stepped inside, the whole world fell silent. Elegant crystal chandeliers, dim candlelight, a lavish yet elegant setting where every detail was perfectly designed. But I only had eyes for Victor. I had entered his world. And that night, for the first time, I really felt something. When we sat down at our table, Victor's gaze was on me. "Tonight will be real, Emma," he said, locking his eyes on mine. I felt a slight shudder inside me, but it wasn't fear, it was anticipation. After a while, our champagne glasses arrived. Victor raised his glass slightly. "Tonight, to forget the past and just enjoy the moment. For you," he added, without taking his eyes off me. Something stirred inside me. I raised my glass and touched it lightly to him. Then, for tonight, when I took the first sip, even the warmth of the champagne was not as effective as Victor's gaze. When the meal began, Victor was in control, as always. He placed the orders without even looking at the menu. The waiters moved without asking anything. He dominated the place. And me, for the first time, I was letting a man really dominate me. "No, it's a game," my inner voice screamed. But another part of me, "Let yourself go," and I silenced my inner voice for the first time in a long time. The more I talked to Victor, the more I understood him. He was no ordinary man. He was a strong man who chose his every word carefully, who read people. But there was something else. He really saw me. He was doing something Daniel never did. He felt me. I don't know how the time passed, but before I knew it, the sweets were gone. I was lost in the magic of the night. Victor took the last sip of his wine and looked directly into my eyes. "That's it," he said slowly. I tilted my head slightly. "What?" His smile was light, but deep. Reality. I trembled inside. But he went on. "I know what you were thinking when you first came, Emma," he said. "It's just a meal, isn't it? It was just a meal." I took a deep breath, but Victor tilted his head to the side and smiled slightly. "But now you know." He weighed his words. This was never just a meal. And at that moment, I realized the whole reality. It wasn't just a meal. This was not just an offer. It was a transformation. He watched me, I thought. And then, putting his hand on the table, he whispered softly, "We're going to the hotel, Emma." Just 2 words, but it created a whirlwind inside me, and I nodded without hesitation. It was no longer about money. This was no longer just a matter of one night. This was something that brought me back to life, and I didn't want to stop it. When I got into the limousine, I felt both fear and excitement. When I sat next to Victor, he stared into my eyes without touching me. "You want this too, don't you?" he asked. "Do I?" I was storming inside. But I couldn't lie to him. "Yes," I whispered. And at that moment, Victor bowed his head slightly. Then you'll never forget this night, Emma. And the limousine sped off into the night. I was about to become a completely different woman that night. The moment I walked through the hotel door, Victor's presence filled the air. He hadn't said a word yet, but he had me in his gaze. As soon as I closed the door, he suddenly pulled me to him. When his warm skin touched my body, all the resistance in me shattered. I thought nothing. I didn't question anything. I just felt. When I felt his hands on my body, a fire awoke inside me that I had forgotten for years. He pulled me to him and closed his mouth on mine like a hungry man. He pulled that silk dress off me and tore all my underwear to shreds like a lion, bringing to the surface the lust that had been sleeping inside me. It was no longer a game. It was an explosion. Neither of us could stop. I was letting out all the passion, the desire, the need that I had kept inside me for years. I wanted to tear Victor apart. He was moving me around the room like a toy. I was experiencing this pleasure. I don't know if it was the fire that had been building up inside me for years, but I was enjoying it. Victor's touch knew no boundaries. He was breaking all the boundaries I had set for myself, one by one. I wanted him, until the morning, over and over again, hour after hour. Neither of us could get enough of each other. As our bodies melded together, all thoughts faded from my mind. This wasn't just one night. It was the beginning of a night I'd never experienced in my life. And Victor, he put me in such a state that I gave him control of everything. When I opened my eyes, my head was spinning. My whole body was still burning from Victor's touch. But the most striking thing was that Victor was still there. The room was lit by the morning sun. Victor was lying on his back on the bed. One arm was on the pillow. His chest was heaving, and his body was bruised and scratched, as if he had been in a fight. What had I done? He looked perfect. And I was realizing what I had done. What was I doing here? I spent the whole night with him. How many times? How many hours? I didn't know, but all I knew was that I was a different woman. I got up and went to the bathroom. I looked in the mirror. I didn't recognize myself. My eyes were bright. My skin was still flushed with excitement. My lips were swollen. But all the pallor and tiredness was gone from my face, as if I had been reborn. But I had a strange feeling inside. Happiness? Guilt? I couldn't decide which. I rubbed my hand over my face and took a deep breath. I stopped for a moment and saw the envelope folded on the edge of the bed. The money Victor gave me last night. $57. Money to pay off all my debts. The thing that made all this possible. And in that moment, I really understood what it all meant. When I got home, I was seething with anger, but my anger wasn't at Victor. It was at Daniel. When I opened the door, I stepped inside and looked around. The living room was the same. The furniture was disorganized. There were empty beer bottles on the table. And Daniel? He was still sitting on that couch. His eyes were still fixed on the TV. When he saw me, he looked up, but he didn't ask anything. He didn't ask what I was wearing. He didn't even realize I hadn't been home until morning. As if nothing had happened, he turned his head away and continued to watch the TV without a care in the world. At that moment, something inside me snapped. I had spent the whole night in the arms of another man, and my husband didn't even care. He didn't worry about me. He didn't even notice. And at that moment, all my anger shifted. I reached into my pocket. I took out that envelope, and I threw it in front of Daniel. Take it. Pay your debts. Daniel took the envelope in surprise and opened it. His eyes widened when he saw the money inside. He looked at me. Emma, what is this? I looked at the puzzled look on Daniel's face. He was still trying to make sense of the money in his hand. Emma, what is this? Where did you get all this money? I stared at him. I wasn't going to tell him everything. She didn't deserve that. I took a deep breath and crossed my arms over my chest. I found a solution, Daniel. Isn't that all that matters to you? Paying off our debts. You can breathe easy now. My voice was so calm that I wondered how I could stand like this. Daniel squinted his eyes. There was doubt in him, but at the same time, he was mesmerized by the money. He looked at the money in his hand, then at me, but in the end, he didn't ask anything. I knew he wouldn't, because he didn't really want to know. And I retreated to my room with a storm inside me. I went into the bathroom and looked in the mirror. Who was I? What happened tonight? Victor's touches, his looks, his words, and most importantly, what it made you feel. The lure of money was one thing, but what about my feelings? Was it only beautiful with Victor? Was this life, this way of making money, only with him so fascinating? Or was where this path would take me so different? As these questions echoed in my head, my phone rang. I looked at the screen and my heart raced. Victor. I opened the message. Tomorrow night, same number, kör. Want to win? Something stuck inside me. I wanted to say yes without thinking. $50,000. Again. But a second later, the second message came. But not with me this time. With my friend Jesus. My whole body flinched. What? I stared at the screen. My heart was beating like crazy. This was something else now. I had to make a choice. Last night, it was different, but now, was there a way back? The storm inside me was getting bigger and bigger. And at that moment, I realized that I had really reached a turning point. What was I supposed to do now? I took this money once. What about the second time? If you do it once, do you do it all the time? Accepting it a second time would have changed the color of this business completely. How would you respond to this message? Share with me in the comments. And if you want to see more of this story, don't forget to subscribe.